It's important to know how to get around in Spanish. There are different modes of transportation, and you do not need to remember all of these. However, it's good to review them so that you can recognize if you hear them or see them written down. If there's one that I suggest definitely memorizing for any trip, is the word for car. And a car in Spanish is coche. Now, in different Spanish speaking places of the globe, there are different words for car. You can say coche, you can say carro, or you can say auto. Now, for some of my students, the word auto is the easiest to remember because it looks like auto, like an automobile. Choose which one is the easiest for you and stick with that. You do not need to know three different words for car because that becomes tedious. But choose one and try and remember it. Coche, carro, and auto. Okay, the next one is pretty easy because a taxi in Spanish is taxi. Necesito un taxi. I need a taxi. It's the same for Uber. Necesito un Uber. You just say it with a bit of an accent. Uber. I need an Uber. Necesito un Uber. And then if you're taking the bus, which is great, you're going to be using many different words depending where you are. And many places you can just say el bus, the bus. So it's the same word, it's just with the Spanish intonation. Bus. Some places call it the colectivo. Colectivo. This is very common in Argentina. El colectivo. And then in certain places like the Canaries, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, they will use the word guagua for bus, okay? So this is a really fun word to say, but it is not used in the majority of Spanish-speaking places. If you're going to these particular destinations, then it's a good word to know. Guagua. Okay, vamos a la próxima. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so let's go through a review of the words that we have been learning for transportation. First, we have coche, auto, and carro. Remember, these are the words for a car. Next, we have the word for bus. Bus, colectivo, or guagua. Okay, those are all fun ones to know. Most important is bus, but in Argentina, remember, they use colectivo, and in Las Canarias and Puerto Rico, they may use the word guagua. Now we have the word for train, and this is kind of a similar word in Spanish and English. Train is el tren, and this is really important to know because perhaps you are buying tickets for el tren. This is really common in certain areas of Latin America, specifically Peru. If you're buying a ticket to Machu Picchu, okay, on the train, you're going to want to know the word el tren. If you are going anywhere in Spain, you might also be using a train, el tren, so that you can get around. Now, there are different companies that specialize in the train services in Spain. Maybe you're going to be using the company called Renfe or Omio. And those are specific to Spain, but the general word overall for train in Spain is going to be el tren. And this is really important to know because it will help you get around the country easy and fast. My favorite way to get around a city that has this transportation option is through the metro or the subway. And if you are traveling in a Spanish speaking country and you want to use this method of transportation, you're going to have to know what the words are. So, just like in English, how we have different words for metro and subway, it's the same in Spanish. The metro is el metro. Okay, it's the same word just with the Spanish accent. El metro. And subway in Spanish is el subte. So different places might use different words. For example, I know that when I lived in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, they use the word subte, subway. But when I lived in Madrid, in Spain, they use the word metro. So it just depends on the destination, but they both mean metro and subway. underground train system. While on your vacation in a Spanish speaking country, you're going to need to know some words for the airport. The nice thing is that the majority, if not all, airports nowadays have their different signs in Spanish and in English. But it is important to know some of these words if you want to feel even more confident and be able to talk in Spanish with other people about these items. Okay, so the first word that I think is very essential, whether it's for the airport, the train, the metro, or just in general, is the word for ticket. Now, you can use the word tiquete, but it doesn't always work. And what I would choose instead is the word billete. Let's say it together. Billete. Billete means ticket, okay? So the billete para el metro, your metro ticket, or the billete para el avión, or para el vuelo, the ticket for the plane, okay? Your plane ticket. Remember that the double L in Spanish makes a Y sound, okay? So it's billete, billete. Great job. You ready for the next one? Okay, so we have the word for airport. Very similar, it's just spoken a little differently than in English. Aeropuerto. Aeropuerto. Okay, it's a long word, so it can be difficult to say. So say it slowly and remember to fragment it into the different syllables if it's tricky to say. Aeropuerto. Then we have your gate, okay? Puerta, okay? Sometimes they'll say puerta de embarque, but that's less necessary to know. Just know puerta means gate, and it's also the word used for door. Puerta. The actual flight is el vuelo. El vuelo. And then, of course, we need to know the word for vacation, vacación. Vacación, okay? Wonderful job. Vamos a la próxima. So remember, we just learned the word for ticket, billete, okay? So this is a visual representation, and sometimes pictures can really help you remember what you're learning. Billete. Here, I have a little picture of an airplane to remember that we are learning vocabulary at the airport. So, el vuelo is the flight. But the word for the plane, the actual aircraft, is avión. Avión. And then our last word is aeropuerto, which you already learned. Great job. We have el vuelo, avión, el avión, and el aeropuerto. Fantástico. First, when traveling around, you're probably going to need to have something that you put your clothing into. It could be a suitcase or a backpack. Now, many students, such as myself when I was a student, like to travel around with a backpack. It's a lot easier. And the way we say backpack is mochila. Mochila. A backpacker, someone who travels around with a big backpack on their back, is called a mochilero. It's kind of easy to remember if you remember the word mochila. Mochilero. If you have a suitcase, we have two different words here that we can use for suitcase. We have la maleta or el equipaje. Now, either one works. I think la maleta is a little easier to remember, but either one is perfect and it means suitcase. So no matter where you're traveling, you can use these vocab. La maleta, equipaje, or mochila. If you want to say, I have a suitcase, tengo una maleta. Or, I have a backpack, tengo una mochila. Okay? Pretty straightforward and easy. Let's go to the next one.